This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Hello everyone, Rob here. So if you're hearing this isn't the original intro and all the bells and frills and whistles that you would hear of the show. This is the YouTube version of the show, and the reason this episode exists this way, because you probably clicked a link on the Facebook page or on Twitter, because as you know, the BatmanUniverse.net's podcast and website are currently down due to server issues. So I had to go back through and retweak this episode and take out some of the music so I could put up some royalty-free music so YouTube wouldn't flag it or mute certain sections, because I used the Batman Arkham video game soundtrack just for underlining as we're discussing the comic book. So you'll kind of hear some just generic Christmas music in here, kind of underlining some things, and some parts of the audio where I couldn't quite remove everything might be there. So if you hear a silence in the episode, just advance a little bit, because the only other spot that has music is when I'm reading the synopsis. So most everything should be intact. You're not going to hear the traditional Drake Christmas music that I would normally play. Like I said, this is all royalty-free music. So hopefully YouTube doesn't flag everything, and hopefully you can actually hear this episode, and hopefully you will go back out and check the real episode once the Batman universe gets the servers up and running. I hope this episode finds you well this holiday season, however you're celebrating it. Thank you for being a supporter of the show, and more importantly, thank you for being a supporter of the Batman universe. So, without further ado, here is our Christmas episode. We hope you guys enjoy it. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and Happy Holidays to you and your family. Thank you. 3, 2, 1, Drake. Welcome to episode 60.
Now, on page 6 and 7, we get a little flashback of Dick Grayson talking about when he was Robin going up against Two-Face. And I don't know, I tried looking for it. Does anybody know if this is from an actual issue from like the 50s or 60s, or is this all from Dixon's imagination?
Yeah, I doubt it. I don't. I think it's probably just, because back then continuity wasn't really there. He was like, oh, here's this issue and the next issue. Like, I don't know if they're pulling from it so much as creating a new backstory,
Yeah. And did anybody feel like it was a little Batman Forever-ish ending with the two standing there? Or
Oh, man, it's true.
I know, Pikmin.
Yeah, I was kind of... and then also, too, on page 7, the way Two-Face is acting, I don't like this version of Two-Face. I like the animated series like Big Bad Harv. Him rolling on the floor and doing all this, it just to me is not in character how I see it. And I almost feel like it is like... someone showed this to Tommy Lee Jones, and he was like, "Okay, so that's how I play it," But Ryan, what'd you think of these 2 pages here, or anything?
Well, it's interesting, because I did kind of think, like, because although past continuity doesn't show up a whole lot, this issue is kind of all about that, and it's weird if it wasn't shown somewhere else, because we see Lonely Place of Dying, and we see like Jason Todd's origin in here, and Chuck Dixon is no stranger to pulling obscure people from past continuities and actually honoring them. We saw that in Shotgun Smith, so I kind of wonder if it was original or not. But yeah.
Rob, what'd you think?
I liked it. It made me lean more like where Ryan is. Like, this is probably something. I think just because it's Chuck, because everything else is so faithful, probably take some homework trying to figure it out. But at the same breath, I wouldn't be surprised if this is just something that Dixon just came up with on his own. But I kind of want to believe this is a classic Two-Face story.
I actually tried to look this up. This Two-Face scenario, this might even make this issue better for you guys, I don't know. This Two-Face scenario is in another comic book. It's
Ooh, there you go.
it's in Robin Year One.
Okay.
Oh,
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
And it's done a little bit differently, but it is pretty much this same scenario where he's got both Batman and the other district attorney, and he makes Robin choose who goes. And yeah, it's the same deal.
And that was an annual, right?
I think it's a standalone.
Oh, okay.
No, this is the Robin Year One story that they just recently compiled with the Batgirl. Year
And
One.
didn't
Okay.
Dixon write that as well?
It's just out of my reach.
Because I know 1 year DC, every annual was a year one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is not that.
Okay.
No, this is before that.
Yeah, this is Chuck Dixon and Scott Beatty. Yeah.
oh, is it okay?
Okay. Oh, I
Yeah,
remember
this is
that.
kind of like that lime green cover that's on it where you think you just see his eyes.
Yeah, it's like, well, yeah.
Was it a one shot or
It's 4 issues.
Oh,
It's a 4-issue
Huh.
miniseries, and it got collected. But what's interesting about this is I believe it came out quite a bit after this. The Wikipedia says it came out in 2001. So I wonder if he really wanted to tell this story in full.
Oh, cool.
Kind of,
yeah, that makes sense. That actually is cool if he's like, oh, I kind of set that up a few years
Yeah.
back. Let me.
Yeah.
and I haven't read that story. I ought to give it a shot. I think I've got it laying around somewhere.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
You don't like the Drake?
Hate the Drake.
I love the Drake.
How could you not like the Drake?
Who's the Drake?
Who's the Drake?
The Drake is good. You like the Drake? I love the Drake.
What about the Drake? Oh, screw the Drake. I love the Drake.
This is Cam Bowen, voice of Tim Drake on Young Justice, and you're listening to Everyone Loves the Drake.
Hi, this is James Tynan IV, and I love the Drake.
This is George Perez, and everybody likes the Drake, especially the cakes.
Hi, this is Mark Wolfman, and everyone loves the Drake.
Hi, this is Marcus Toe, artist for Red Robin. You've been listening to Robin, Everybody Loves the Drake podcast.
Good for them. Love the Drake.
Got to love the Drake.
I'm impressed. What can I say? I'm irresistible.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake comic podcast. I'm your host, Rob Myers. Welcome to episode 127. This show is brought to you by the BatmanUniverse.net, your home for all things Batman and Robin. It's been a long year, folks. Whom is celebrating 80 years?
I'm going to re-record that.
Yeah, we didn't record.
It's your home for blah.
It's your home for it's the guy that wears the mask and goes out and punches dirty turkeys in the throat, like Kevin Smith would say. But this is going to conclude our 80th anniversary. Way back in January, I had said, hey, I'm going to try and do every other episode, and we even did a promo, and Terrence was like, if Rob can keep the every other episode. And I think I managed to. I don't know if it went every other episode was continuity and then whatever our guest picked, but it was pretty darn close. So we're on the Batman Universe Podcast Network, and we're also associated with Batman on Films Podcast Network at BatmanPodcastNetwork.com. So between the two universes, you can find us. We are on Facebook at Facebook.com/Everyone Loves the Drake. We are on Twitter at ELTD Podcast. You can check out our Instagram page. You can email into the show at RobinELTDPodcast@Yahoo.com. And there's a YouTube page that we use sparingly, but it is out there. And if you listen to the show on iTunes, especially through Apple Podcasts, leave a review of the show. And in the new year, I promise we will start reading some reviews. So, like I said, I'm Rob, and it is early in the morning at the Drake house. Normally we're an evening kind of people, but I figure since this is our Christmas episode, I made Terrence and Ryan get up extra early so we could unwrap this Christmas present for you guys. So, Terrence, how are you doing this morning, sir?
Very confused. I can explain later, but very confused. Yes. And I'm wearing a hat, so if I disappear in this podcast, the Mad Hatter got me. Yeah.
There you go. And Brian, how are you doing this morning?
I have no hat, so I think I'm doing a little bit better than Terrence. It is the morning. I've become more of a morning person this year. I actually started drinking coffee this year, actually, and boy, that was a good decision based on where the year's gone since then. But I'm very excited to talk about this book today.
Yeah, so we're not going to bury the lead. And I actually had just finished a cup of coffee because I woke up a little bit extra early to finish this book.
Me too.
This was something, and Rob's going to insert the episode number. Episode 60. We had been going through Tim's chronological escapades as we have, and we got to the 0 issue of Robin, and it was a team-up story between Dick and Tim, and Dick tells this story of the first time that he had met Two-Face and had to make a choice and took a severe beating to allow Batman to escape. So like we normally do, as one of us is talking, usually somebody's going through like, hey, this sounds like something that I think I might have read before. It could be something else. So this little nugget that Chuck Dixon had wrote, the cover date is October 1994 for the 0 issue. So in the year 2000, Chuck Dixon took this little nugget of an idea that he had in October of 2000. He and Scott Beatty turned this into Robin Year 1. So I had said to Terrence and Ryan, like, hey, this is kind of my idea. It helps, celebrate. It puts the capper on the 80th anniversary of Robin. And we'll just kind of call it our Christmas episode as well, since it'll be the last episode of the month. And little did I know, as I'm reading this book for the first time, that wouldn't you know it, we're kind of in a holiday season. They don't necessarily mention Christmas, but a certain cold character appears in the book. And I'm like, well, you know what? That counts. I saw snow, I saw ice, and so here we are at Robin Year 1. So what I was reading this out of was the collected trade Batgirl and Robin Year 1, because the duo also got together and did a Batgirl Year 1 story as well. So I'm not sure if Stella, who our last guest was on the show, if she's covered it or not, but that might be something to track down Batgirl to Oracle. So before we get into this, I want to say a big thank you to everybody that had participated in the 80th anniversary celebration for Robin. So there'll be an insert that'll appear right here. Hey, it's Rob here. I wanted to take a brief moment to acknowledge all the people that helped us celebrate Robin's 80th anniversary. I had a long list of people, and I had more people say yes than what I had time slots available. So to everybody else where we were trying to juggle schedules, I want to reconvene and get you on to talk about Robin in some fashion. But the people that I was able to give on, I want to give another shout out again to all these individuals and let you know their episode numbers and what they talked about. So you're like, hey, I missed one here or there. Mike Staley led the first one off, and we did a commentary track for Young Justice Season 2, Episode 8, and that was Episode 107. Terrence, Ryan, and myself did the Robin 80th Anniversary Spectacular issue, and that was Episode 109. Marcus Toe, our big interview for the year. So happy he agreed to be on the show. He talked about all things Red Robin and hockey and everything else. Go back, check that episode out. That was 110. Professor Alan Middleton, thank you, sir, for coming onto the show. He talked about Detention Comics, and that was episode 112. Clinton Robinson, the coffee maestro himself, came on episode 114 and talked about Showcase 93. Issues 11 and 12. Sean Ross came on episode 117 and talked about Robin Annual 6, and that was just a fun issue that I had never read before, and one that I'm going to continue to read because it was just so darn good. Siskoid came on, first time speaking with him. He actually picked the oldest comic to review. That original date for that comic was 1949 from Star Spangled Comics, and his episode number is 119. Jay Oz, a good friend of the show and podcasting partner on Everyone Loves Young Justice. He came on and did a commentary track with Ryan and I for Batman 66 episode. Surf's Up, Joker's High, I believe is the episode. It's blanking on me right now, but that was a fun episode, and that was episode 121. Javi Trujillo came on and did 2 items, a commentary track for Batman the Animated Series Old Wounds, actually technically the new Batman Adventures. And then before that, we did Batman issue 416, and the 2 paired really well together. That was episode 123. Ryan Lauer, spelled like lower, from the amazing Batman Book Club. He came on and did a Batman the Animated Series commentary track for Robin's Reckoning. That was episode 125. The lovely, fantastic Stella, who you just recently heard, released her 200th episode and her 11-year anniversary. And she came on just last week and talked about Batman and Robin issue 3, Batgirl issue 17, Batman and Robin issue 8, and Gotham Academy issue 8. And that was episode 126. And I'm including this last one. It wasn't an 80th anniversary celebration. It was also the first time that the Drake was part of the J.L. May crossover. So we had Justin Kowalski on, and that was episode 113. And we fast forwarded rather into the future and talked about Robin issues 143 and 145. That was a fun episode to do. So thank you to everyone that participated. Again, those that I missed and we just didn't get our schedules lined up, I do want to have you on in the next year. All right, so now let's get back to our Christmas episode. Thank you again, everyone. So there was a list of everybody that had participated. So again, a big thank you. So Robin Year One, I want to ask each of you guys, let's start with Ryan first. Had you read this before we were talking about doing this, or did you read it shortly after we said, hey, this might be, is this a real story that Chuck Dixon wrote?
I only read it in my mind, and if you've already put that clip from that earlier episode, you read that 0-year Robin issue, and you're like, boy, this does seem familiar, because as we've discovered, as we've gone through Tim Drake's Robin escapades, like you said, Two-Face jumps up in a lot. Like, there's a lot of Two-Face and Robin interactions, and we've come to discover that, even talking to Chuck Dixon as he's writing all these books, that he's obviously a pretty big fan of Two-Face and enjoys the two puns and the having him play off of the Batman and Robin dynamic of, there's two crime fighters, and then later on with Tim Drake, it's like, there's two Robins, or there's two people like this at once. So I know I had not read Robin Year One all the way through. I think I had maybe 1 or 2 of the single issues, but it was just a perennial like, maybe if I find the others in the store, in the shop or something, or a cheap trade, I'll find it. But I hadn't read it, and then I think, what was it, maybe last year or the year before even, DC released that really nice Robin Year One Deluxe Edition hardcover, and I did buy it because I was like, okay, that looks gorgeous, and that'll be a good excuse to read. I'm sure we'll podcast about it at some point, and so bringing it up for this show was obviously the excuse to pull that off the shelf and give it a read, and boy, it's a good one.
Terrence, where were you on the Year One? Did you read it before this, or is this the first time?
This is why I said in the beginning I was very confused, because when you said we were doing Robin Year One, I was like, I've read this before, and I don't really like it. But then I started reading it last night. I know I'm a slacker. I'm like, I've never read this before. What is this? And what did I think I read before? So apparently there was another series that came out called Batman and Robin The Gauntlet, which is kind of very similar. It's different art and writing team. It's kind of a similar style set in the same time period. And I had read that and thought it was Robin Year One, I guess, in the weirdness that is my brain. I don't know if they maybe released them together as a trade paperback. Probably not. Anyway, so I started reading it last night for the first time. Didn't really know much about it, and thought it was great. So your question, was it on my radar? Nope, never read it before. Knew about it, just never got to it. It's kind of intimidating because it is in the prestige format, so the back issues are always a little bit more, and it is a much larger size collected trade paperback. So yeah, but I'm glad I did because it was really good.
And I want to make sure I get the artist's name right here, because I'm looking at Javier, I want to say Paludio, if I'm saying that right. His art style seems to really mimic Batman Year One a little bit. Like, Batman's kind of drawn that
Well,
way.
it's like a Batman Year One, Darwin Cook kind of combination.
So it kind of feels like it fits right in there. I mean, not so much like Year One, but you're right. It's more like Darwin Cook, and it also has like that Dark Victory kind of vibe to it at a couple places.
It's very simplified. Like there's a lot of panels where there's just nothing in the background.
Yeah,
it's just a solid color. Yeah.
Which, I mean, it makes the reading of it where, not that I don't want to read more, but as thick as this was for the show, I was like, oh, good, we get some action scenes, and it would go through a couple pages, so it made it go a little quicker. But I think even just as the 4 issues go, I found myself not having to, like, slog through it. It was a pretty easy read. So if you haven't checked this out, definitely go do so.
Especially considering that there's 2 writers.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of dialogue, and there's sections where there's hardly any dialogue. You can just like go through a few pages really fast.
Yeah, and that was the interesting thing that I would assume
Fast?
Dixon...
You mean fluid?
It's fluid, yeah. And it's hard. Like sometimes, we'll complain about, where you discuss about having 2 different artists on a book. And we've done that, a couple times where it's just really jarring. But I half wonder if Beatty might not have been the lion writer of the book and Dixon was more of like the plotter, like here's the ideas, or if they did, work in tandem, like you do book 2, I'll do book, 4 or whatever, something like that. So
I thought it was interesting because you don't see Dixon as a writing team very often.
Right.
But it must have worked well because they did. I think was it Robin Batgirl Year One or something like that. Like it's a team up book.
Oh, did they team up for that as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I've got the trade here and they're both listed. It's the Batgirl Robin Year One trade.
I'm really interested in reading Batgirl Year One after this. I think exposure wise, I believe. Back when DC Daily was a thing, they did review shows on both Robin and Batgirl Year One. They definitely did Batgirl Year One, and I think when they talked about it, they said I think they thought Robin Year One was the better book, just because Batgirl Year as long as we're saying Robin Year One feels or dense. I believe they said Batgirl Year One is like 8 issues. It was like a lot longer, and they thought that it kind of went. It was maybe too long, a little less focused feeling than Robin Year One, but
they definitely
I still
did
really
Robin
want to
Year
read
One.
it.
Oh, sorry, they definitely did Robin Year One because I watched it last night.
Okay,
yeah.
Oh,
nice. So let's just take a look at Robin Year One, Volume 1, or Book 1 in this case, came out October 2000. The synopsis is coming to us by DCFandom.com. And now Book 1 for Robin Year One. The devious Two-Face is interested in the recent reports that Batman now has a teenage sidekick. Indeed, Bruce Wayne has taken young Dick Grayson under his tutelage as Robin, the Boy Wonder. Alfred Pennyworth is unsure of the inclusion of Dick Grayson into Batman's nightly adventures that might end up in disaster. But the butler cannot deny the positive influence the light-hearted boy has on his master, Bruce Wayne. After attending a dinner party for Generalissimo Lee of a foreign country I cannot pronounce, Batman and Robin meet Captain James Gordon, who informs them that a string of kidnappings is taking place in and about Bristol Township. Behind these kidnappings is actually the Mad Hatter, who's been enticing teenage girls with free headsets. His hat transmits a broadcast signal to these headsets that enables him to hypnotize his captives. His plan is to sell the captive girls to Generalissimo Lee. When one of the captive victims turns out to be a girl from Robin's school, the Boy Wonder attempts to solve the case on his own. After school, Dick watches how the Mad Hatter kidnaps another girl. Because as Bruce is attending another party that night, this time on the yacht of the Generalissimo, Robin decides to stop the villain on his own. With little support from Alfred, Dick finds out that the Mad Hatter is delivering the girls to Generalissimo on his yacht. Robin enters the yacht, fights through a horde of goons, rescues the girls, and exposes the Mad Hatter's plot. The General uses his diplomatic immunity to get away, though. Bruce is at first angry with Dick for going at the Mad Hatter alone, but is still proud of his accomplishments. So now that we're on the other side of it, what was your first initial, let's just look at Book 1 as a whole, as no surprise, if you look at the first cover of this, the Mad Hatter is the lead villain, and there's an overarching story throughout the whole thing. So what did you guys think of the inclusion of Mad Hatter as our first real, main main foil for Robin and We'll say Robin and Batman in this case, since this is Dick Grayson's we're in that first year, and the notes that I kind of see here on DC Fandom that there are some flashbacks of Tony Zuko's death taken directly from Dark Victory, which I did not realize till after I was kind of going through the book. And this is, although this is a year one tale in Robin's career, takes place during the year 3 era of Batman's career. So, Ryan, what did you think of Mad Hatter and just some of your high points of this issue?
So, I mean, the first issue does a whole lot to kind of set the stage and tone and all these things for this story. I was impressed pretty quickly that the book doesn't really retread any like Batman history or even much Robin origin stuff. Like, they don't do like, oh, here's the circus and here's the parents dying and here's the oath and here's all that.
Yeah.
They don't do any of that stuff. It's like Robin year 1, so you might assume like, oh, it's just the origin based off of what Batman year 1 is. Kind of. I mean, Batman year 1 is kind of that same, like, slightly after the origin, but there's a lot of elements.
Yeah.
But I was impressed that, like, this is like, no, this is after he's Robin, and this is early on in the career, so that was really impressive. And again, that you don't really see that much, that whole heck of a lot of stories based in this time period either. So that combined with the writing and the art, I was just really impressed right off the bat. And the thing about the art, just in general, to talk about the art for a second, the art in this book is just absolutely gorgeous.
Oh yeah,
it's the right style, it's the right combination of, like, you can read this after Dark Victory. It's like it is like Tim Sale-ish stylized colors in terms of like the simplification of things, but obviously is a lot more close to like the Darwin Cook type of thing. But that's like a really cool. It's almost like if you kind of think of the Loeb Sale stories as like a contemporary reinterpretation of like early years Batman, like from the 30s. You get into a book like this where it feels like it's very timeless feeling, but the art really evokes like this like late 40s, early 50s kind of style in terms of like what the characters are wearing clothes wise. You get like the 50s Batmobile and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel super old fashioned because there's things in it like, telephones and stuff like that, and technology, of course. But it's one of those things where it's like, oh, if you read just modern Batman, this feels like an older flashback story. If you do something like if you read that old, newer 0 hour year issue, and then as a present, and then go back and read this, it would be really cool because it would feel like throwback, like a flashback or whatever. It's really cool, and I think we'll get into overall thoughts at the end, but yeah, this first issue is really great, and the Mad Hatter is a really interesting villain, I think, to put up against Robin. It kind of sets the stage for what Robin and Dick Grayson does, and I almost said Tim Drake. What Dick Grayson do in this whole book is he continually is going out on his own, trying to prove himself, and taking on these like Batman villains by himself, and that's like the running theme in the whole thing. And this is a really creepy interpretation of the Mad Hatter, the way he talks, what he does, how he operates. I mean, he's obviously not the main big bad of the whole book, but the way he gets implemented into the story is really effective. And again, you don't really see Mad Hatter a whole heck of a lot, and man, it's really he's a really good adversary for Dick Grayson early on here.
Terrence, what do you have for the Mad Hatter and just like the overall feel of the book?
Yeah, generally I'm not really a big Mad Hatter fan, and I was having flashbacks to the Dark Knight series that came out right before New 52, where it was all Mad Hatter, and I think it was New 52, and I was just like, not my favorite. But in this case, I thought it worked really well because he was more villainous than obnoxious, and it was a good villain for Robin to go up against because he was kidnapping young girls that are around the same age as Robin, so it kind of is in his wheelhouse. One of them turns out to be a girl that Robin or Dick is going to school with, that he was kind of flirting with a little bit, or kind of catching her eye and she was catching his eye. So it made it kind of personal. And then, when Robin, has to go up against, the Mad Hatter, you're not thinking like, oh, well, this is, some gigantic, monster that there's no way he could beat him up, or some, adult. You think like, yeah, Dick could take the Mad Hatter in a fight, just don't put on one of those hats and you'll be okay. So, actually, for someone who's not a Mad Hatter fan, I actually liked it in this story.
Yeah, I was the same way with the Mad Hatter. Initially, when I opened the book, I was like, oh, it's the Mad Hatter. I think that's how a lot of Bat fans are kind of like with the Mad Hatter. Like, he's just kind of a one-note villain. It's always Alice in Wonderland, and it's some variation. But there was something that was, I think, a little bit more creepy, I think, that we've all said with, he's probably, it doesn't really say it, but is he into like sex trafficking? Like, he's getting all these girls.
Well, that's the thing too. I think, and we've seen some of this in some of Dixon's other stories. I think is where it's scarier because of what you don't see.
What I also liked about this as well is the progression of Dick Grayson. Like, he is very much carefree. He and Batman are just out fighting bad guys, and there's no real sense of danger for Dick that he can see. He's with Batman, he's been trained, and even just him hopping out of the car, out of the limousine at school, and he's just very cavalier about it. And the thing I think that's really interesting, and my only knock to the book, is Alfred's letter writing. At some points, just the way that they were, scripting it and having it being actual, like, written in cursive, at some times was kind of hard to read. I'm like, okay, what is that word? But I did like that there is another through line, that you're getting a narration from Alfred at the different stages throughout this book. So what did you guys think of Alfred's commentary? You could talk about it as a whole throughout the whole book, or just in book one here, of Alfred's concerns of essentially Batman taking out Robin at such a young age. Let's go with Terrence on this one.
I had that trouble too with the words a little bit. I have that trouble with the Batman who laughs too sometimes, with that black background with the red words, especially if it's nighttime and it's a little dark. I'm like,
everything I say has weight and meaning.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought it was good because you think of, I don't know, I might offend some Robin fans with this, but I think of like the quintessential Robin origin story as Batman Forever. I don't know why. I know people are going to like yell at me for that. But that's kind of probably the one that I've seen the most or heard the most, or most people know, like it just kind of has that. And in that story, I always liked how it was Alfred who was trying to encourage Bruce to be like, you need to, work with this guy. He makes the Robin costume for him. It was Alfred like kind of pushing it, and then this is kind of the reverse. But I didn't come up with this idea, but I heard it in some of the videos I watched last night. It might have been in DC Daily or some of the others. This story is in a lot of ways Chuck Dixon trying to justify why it's okay for Batman to have a Robin, because on the surface, taking out, a little kid, in Batman Forever, he's what, like, he's supposed to be 17, but he's really 26, I think, the actor, and that's not even a joke. I think we looked it up one time, and we're like, well, it is a joke, but not not an intentional joke. Robin's young in this issue, he's middle school, he's like 12, so there's really this justification of it's okay to have a Robin, because, you have this voice of reason from Alfred and from Commissioner Gordon, who are both like, this is ridiculous. This kid's too young. If something happens to this kid, I'm going after him. Why did I find this bat all full of blood, and now now this kid's disappeared? What the hell's going on here? It does kind of justify it where, when Robin runs away and ends up with the League of Shadows, it's like, look, you've got to do this. You've got to have this kid under your wing and take him out and do this, or something really worse is going to happen than what could happen with you. I forgot, what was the original question? Oh, Alfred. Yeah, I couldn't understand his writing either. Yeah.
Ryan.
Yeah, so even reading this in the big deluxe edition, I also had trouble like reading some of this. I'm like, man, they could have. I don't know if it's how it compares to the other versions, original versions. I assume it's just been blown up for this book, but I'm like, probably could have changed the lettering a little bit in this version. That was a good opportunity for them, because even things like Two-Face, every time Two-Face or even Mad Hatter talks, they have some different, and Joker later on for like 2 pages, have different, dialogue styles in the way it's lettered. But that is literally my only critique of the whole book, probably, is that. But the writing itself is so good, and you're right, is that Alfred is it serves all these different purposes for the story. It kind of connects the threads together. When it starts and you start reading and you're like, oh, who is this talking? And you're like, oh, it's Alfred. That's cool. It's cool transitions between scenes and stuff like that. But it also does the thing of it gives weight and extra. I can't think of a good way to say this. It gives all this extra context. There's the good word. To both the dual stories and perspectives of Batman and Robin, Bruce and Dick in this story, because they don't really talk to each other a whole lot about what's going on until things get serious. You know what I mean? So Alfred is there to kind of bring those threads together, and that's what he does as a character, and it's just a really good way of showing that. And it also does what you guys were saying in terms of almost being the voice of the audience, being like, yeah, well, we have to kind of explain the situation here with Batman letting a kid into his world like this, and it doesn't get talked about just even there, but like it's part of the story. A lot of the characters talk about it, and especially Gordon, that's like a big point. And you get that from Leslie Tompkins and some other characters too. So it's just part of the theme of the book, which is great, because Robin, Year One, like it's part of that legacy and history. It's one of those things where you could give this book to anybody at any level of Batman fandom, and if they had questions or misconceptions or concerns about like what the character is or how he could be interpreted, like this one addresses a lot of those things in a subtle way while also being a good story. And those are like that's all the quadrants you want when you have a story like this.
One thing about the Alfred narration that I like is he talks about how it's good for Master Bruce to have Robin in his life too. I think there's one point where he's like, I think I almost saw him crack a smile. So I think that insight of, like Bruce is becoming a better person and is becoming happier and more sane a little bit with having this kid in his life, and is also a nice touch to the book too.
So one other thing with like Alfred's letter, I almost thought, okay, who is he writing this to? Was the other thing, like, was he in the middle of writing this to like children's services or something? You don't find out, till later on, because he's like making some really points of like Bruce is kind of pushing Dick, or Dick is made to feel like this is like fun and games, or he's bringing this boy into the crusade. And at times Alfred even says, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he even feels like Bruce was making the wrong choice for himself, and now he's kind of forcing these games of fancy on this young boy, and there could be bigger ramifications. And one thing that I think kind of pairs with that is when they're sitting at the dinner table, and I keep wanting to say Tim. Dick sees the newspaper about his classmate. They have that discussion, and as Dick is going out to head out to school, Bruce says, one more thing, stay out of trouble, and that's in quotes. And the next thing is Dick was like throwing spitballs or something like that, getting into the principal's office so he can hear. And I'm like, was that the literally quote unquote like stay out of trouble, hint hint, wink wink, like no, seriously, I want you to do something to get in trouble. So later on, is he just re-emphasizing, like, of course Dick was going to take a baseball bat to the chest because Bruce kind of inadvertently asked him to put himself in danger when he didn't. So did you guys pick up on that at all? Let's start with Terrence.
I did not. Sorry.
Maybe I'm way too deep in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably there, but I did not pick up on that. I kind of thought it was Dick just kind of improvising, but maybe I totally missed it.
Ryan?
No, I took it that way, Rob. Okay. He's trained by Batman. He's smart. He knows what he's doing. That's the theme of the whole book, is that Dick is... It's almost like life outside of Robin is just an afterthought, and what Alfred says is kind of this whole thing of like, I'm worried that he's leaving it like a normal childhood behind and stuff, because he's so driven to help people, not really to be well, it's kind of a proto version of Tim Drake in terms of what Robin is and what his function is, or the first person to realize that. I mean, we attribute that to Tim Drake a lot because that's what this show is, but a lot of those elements are here in this book and with its interpretation of what Dick Grayson sees himself as doing as Robin, right?
One little funny thing on the scene at the principal's office, it is Mr. N. Rooney, and it is suggested that is Ned Rooney from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
I knew that had to be a reference to something.
Yeah. So that was some of the little bit of extras that I found online while surfing through. So it's one of those little nuggets that Dixon puts in. So this first issue kind of wraps up with everything converging all on the same place here. The person that is doing that wants the girls is the same El Presidente, lack of a better word, that Bruce is reluctantly meeting on the yacht, and everything converges on the boat that Robin infiltrates, and you get a little like bumbling. I could totally hear Kevin Conroy when he's at the boat of the deck, like, "Oh, what does this button do?" And he spills the drink in, and like, we can't go. Stops him from going to international waters. So what did you guys think of the end of the resolution on this for how Tim takes down Mad Hatter and how this first issue concludes the story? Let's start with Terrence on this one.
Yeah, maybe I should change my answer from before for the quintessential Robin story origin to Robin's Reckoning and the animated series. When you said Kevin Conroy, I thought of the scene. I think it's even in that one where they say, "Oh, Bruce Wayne is here at the circus," and he like stands up and he knocks his popcorn over, and he's like, "Whoa, I'm so clumsy and foolish." Right? And so now I'm like, oh man, maybe it's not the nipples in the movie, but since it is a 4-part story, you kind of have to do something in the middle of it, or at least at the first part ending, that's going to cause conflict and strife and not have a nice, easy resolution. And I thought this was a really interesting way to do it because it shows how dedicated Dick Grayson is to helping other people, and that he's not just, this is fun. It's so much fun to jump from buildings and do somersaults in the air, and I'm out here because it's all so much fun. Like, he really is a really good person who really would do anything, put himself in harm's way, take a beating to basically just help other people. But you can also see at the same point why Bruce Wayne would be like, this is not cool, kid. I can't allow, a 12-year-old to take a beating from villains just to help people. So I thought it was a really great way to kind of really reveal each character.
Yeah. So like I was saying earlier, what happens in this issue with Dick Grayson, Robin overcoming Mad Hatter pretty much by himself, with Bruce being unable to do anything about it, it's kind of the setup for what we'll see with other villains in the rest of the story. And I thought it was really well done. I mean, it really shows the growing dichotomy and conflict that you'll see between Batman and Robin through the rest of the story. And I thought it wrapped up really well. And you could read this first issue almost standalone, and you don't even really need the rest of the book, to be honest.
Right? Yeah.
It kind of holds up by itself, which is what you want in a first issue of anything, really. Especially something like this. It definitely made me eager to continue the story, knowing a little bit about where it goes.
Well, let's just get right into the second issue. This came out in November of the same year, same writing team and everything like that. Book 2 of Robin Year 1. Following the Mad Hatter's arrest, Batman and Robin defeat several more would-be supervillains, such as Cluemaster, Firefly, Killer Moth, and Blockbuster. Robin grows more and more confident with each victory, heedless of Batman's warnings that Gotham's more elite criminals will not be so easily beaten. True to these warnings, Two-Face soon emerges and kidnaps Lawrence Watkins, the judge who permitted and presided over the appeal trial of mobster Vincent Maroney. Since the trial gave Maroney a chance to scar Dent with acid, Two-Face's twisted logic holds Watkins responsible for murdering Dent. Revenge on Watkins, however, is only a small part of Two-Face's goal. His main target is none other than Batman and Robin. Despite Batman's precautions, the dynamic duo are eventually captured by Two-Face as well, and forced into a mock trial. After declaring the defendants guilty, Two-Face places Batman and Watkins on a custom-built double gallows, and dares Robin to appeal for their lives. A desperate Robin plays along, calling for neither man to hang if Two-Face's next 2 coin flips come up clean. Both flips land in Robin's favor, and Two-Face cuts Watkins free, only to reveal a trapdoor and a gallows that allows the judge to drown instead. As Robin reels from Watkins' death, Two-Face savagely beats Robin with a baseball bat, while Batman is forced to watch. An enraged Batman breaks his own bonds and beats Two-Face and his men unconscious, before rushing the badly injured Robin back to the Batcave. The first thing that I really liked after you've had that issue 1 of all right, this has kind of pulled me in, it's going to be a 4-issue story or whatever, however long it is in any type of story, is what we like to do on this show is have a nice little cold opening and something that the animated series would do from time to time. You get a cold opening in this, and it's a car chase. It's a funny car chase with a killer moth, which ironically, and maybe not ironically, that they probably planned it this way, that also ties into, this is a character that ties directly into Batgirl's origin, being the killer moth. But I thought this was funny with chasing him, and he's got the Mothmobile, which I thought was really funny. And Killer Moth is probably right up there with other Batman villains where I go, it's just much like Mad Hatter, it's the Mad Hatter. Yeah. Killer Moth is kind of crazy enough that you almost just don't, he's meant to not be taken seriously, but sometimes that's a detriment to the character when you see, this is a Killer Moth story. I don't care if it's Scott Snyder, if it's writing the Killer Moth, right off the bat, you might go, it's Killer Moth though. Yeah. But it's actually really kind of funny. And again, like we were talking about, that Dick is putting himself into harm's way to save a life, even the life of somebody like Killer Moth, that he can see that the goo and the, what is it called, the cocoon gun has backfired and gotten on his wings, and Killer Moth is falling to his death, which he thinks he's going to be able to fly, but doesn't. So what'd you think of the cold opening of this and the Killer Moth interaction?
I love cold opens, especially in stories like this, because it instead of reading it as a single issue, you're just reading it as part of the story, and it's almost like a cinematic thing when you watch a movie and there's a nice big action scene. You can kind of decompress a little bit and let the character work kind of flow through the action. And as we were saying, the artwork and colors are stylized and simplified in here, and it really looks just gorgeous here, in this oversized deluxe edition. That would be my preferred way to tell the listeners to read this, because you get these, it's they do the whole New Batman Adventures thing where when it's nighttime, you got these red skies and this overcast blues and stuff on Batman, all these flat colors. It just looks great. And having Killer Moth, it all makes sense. And I would have been sad to get through this entire book without some sort of action scene or a few scenes with Batman and Robin in the Batmobile talking. I don't know. Every time we get a story and we get scenes like that or episodes like that, if we talk about the animated series or a TV show or something, it's always fun. It's always a cool interaction. It's always a cool thing to see. I don't know. It just kind of always is a Batman and Robin thing that I like to read. And having it be a action scene like this is interesting. And Killer Moth, here he's just used as a goofy, Batman 66 type of villain. That's he's easy, whatever. He's kind of a goofy villain, and they do call to that when Alfred is pulling the moth goo out of his costume, and Dick is Alfred, a girl could have whipped the Killer Moth. And I read that, I was oh, that's funny. But then I thought to myself, oh yeah, I haven't read Batgirl Year One, but I know that he's the main villain of the whole story. So this is obviously not maybe a call back, but a call forward to... Yeah. Because I don't remember exactly when Batgirl Year One was released in relation to this. Was it literally right after it, or a year or two later?
I believe so. I'll have to do some quick looking here, but I'm pretty sure it was not that long after this.
It's like in my head, I'm like, well, Dixon must have known, like, and Beatty must have known where. Either I don't know if the next story was greenlit, or maybe they had ideas of where they were going to go with it if they did a Batgirl year one.
Yeah.
Because spoilers, they do very subtly introduce Barbara Gordon in this story too, and it's done in a really, like, again, subtle but really cool way. So,
definitely.
But the opening of this issue was really great.
Yeah, and then you get little things like in the police station, see a little shot of Clue Master, and the rumors of the human bat prove false, that they have this actually man-bat looking drawing on the board. And we're introduced into Two-Face. So this, I think, was the big draw for the three of us to read this story and go, okay, how does this little exposition in the 0 issue of Robin fit in? How does Dixon formulate this into a full story? And I got to tell you that this is, even just in that little opening panel you get here of the introduction to Two-Face, and as he goes through the story, this is probably one of the more violent versions of Two-Face. Like,
holy hell,
he has
to take a line from the book.
Right, yeah, exactly. That's delivered by Robin, but this is a totally unredeemable, and this is probably got to be shortly after his transformation into Two-Face, where he is, lack of a better word, he is pissed off, like, to no end. This is just, uneasy is the wrong word, but I was
unsettling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to go from the creepy but goofy looking Mad Hatter to the 100% goofy Killer Moth to go to this Two-Face.
Yeah.
What is interesting to me as I was reading this is that the combination of the tone and the writing and the art, most importantly, does a really good job of kind of coalescing all of this. And even though it's really interesting, like the book has this, I'm obviously struggling with words a lot this morning, but it's got this deceptive, sweet nature to it in terms of, it's like a throwback of, like, the Robin of the 50s and stuff. But this story has a lot of edge to it, especially in the interpretations of characters. And Two-Face is probably the most explicit example of that, where this is one of the most brutal versions of Two-Face I've read, and this probably goes up there with some of the other ones that we've seen in things like Prodigal, or even No Man's Land, or even Gotham Central and stuff. Like,
good one.
I would put him right up there with this in terms of what he does. Yeah, it's not as maybe super realistic or graphically violent, but it kind of is. And the things that he does, like, they don't pull any punches in this book.
No.
And there's even more moments of what you don't see makes it worse. But you do see a lot in this book, and they don't shy away from making Two-Face, like you said, just an irredeemable, a horrible villain in this.
Yeah, to the point where, Batman wants to rehabilitate the villains, and you go, Mr. Freeze, all he's trying to do is save his wife, and that's why he's acting out the way that he is. And maybe with the right, program that Gotham can do, that he can be redeemed, where this is somebody that you would just go, this dude needs to go to the gas chamber right now. And you get really into that in the courtroom scene where, he's got the judge and the jury, and okay, they're all probably dolls or mannequins, and where he's, flipping the coin, and then you get the, Terrence had to bug off here for family reasons, but there is there a Batman Forever reference right in this book where we're in the courtroom scene and you see Batman leaping up over over the courtroom as Harvey Dent gets sprayed with the acid. But when it comes time to give the fate of the judge that was there in the courtroom, and Harvey unmasks the executioner, so to speak, this dude has been dead for a while, and Javier's his pencil work, as going, oh, this book is so nice to look at. And you have like a muted color tone palette that fits really well with like what a Darwin Cook would do.
And then bam, you see the kind of like gruesome stuff that you're like, oh.
Yeah. So, and the other moment where once you kind of see this and you start going down the rabbit hole of how unredeemable Two-Face is when he's on the roof of the building and he's going to throw one of the twins off, and you just go, okay, clearly that's not a real baby, and you're kind of led to believe like, no, this SOB just threw a kid off of a roof, and you go, okay, it's not, but this is...
I wouldn't put it past this version of Two-Face.
No, not at all. The moment at hand, the very thing that we were talking about, and whatever episode number Rob is going to find as he digs through the homework, and the audio will be in here somewhere of us talking about this, is here's where where Dixon lifts this story idea right out of the book, where you have Batman and I forget who the other individual is at the moment, are both tied up by nooses, and Robin's going to have to choose who lives, who dies, and so it is tweaked a little bit here.
Yeah, I was noticing that. I was just going through that Robin issue on DC Universe as we were talking.
So I believe if I don't lose my place here as I pull up the actual real issue here, it's done with him getting slapped around, I believe, by Two-Face, where he ends up just taking the punches because Robin knows, at least in the earlier incarnation in 1994, that Robin is taking these punches by Two-Face, knowing that Batman is going to get out of it, and he just has to withstand a little bit longer. So I don't know if that's telegraphed really well here, or Dick is going to he's willing to die because he's not going to choose. So while it does start with him getting punched and kicked, like once the baseball bat comes out, I'm like, am I watching The Walking Dead right now? Like, this, being the Robin fan, and even just a fan of Batman in general, this was a hard scene to, I knew we have, 2 more books to go through that Robin was going to come out winning, but this was a rough one. And then kind of what transpires after this. So what was from what we read to this, what was your take on how Dixon changed what his initial floated idea was?
Yeah, I kind of wondered if it was like he changed it because of the story, or changed it because he was able to do more or go further out there because this was not a monthly book or something,
right.
Like in terms of the hard edge thing. But it kind of works both ways because you can kind of read that Robin issue with the flashback as like, well, either this is Dick's interpretation of it and what happened in Robin Year One is what really happened, or in your headcanon you could be like, well, the whole issue, Dick is kind of not really wanting to tell Tim like the full story and everything, so he's kind of, even in the flashbacks that we see, it's not exactly the full story or whatever, and then we get to read the full story. So that's kind of a cool thing. It works both ways.
Yeah. I'm glad that this was in a trade that I could just read it in one setting, and this would have been kind of heavy to end the issue on, and it ends with Batman carrying and how symbolic and just things that we've seen in Batman lore over and over again, Batman holding the body of
a beaten Robin.
Yeah. And him saying, Alfred, he's dying. I would have been like, man, December needs to get here really quick because I want to read the next issue. So do you have any other thoughts for issue 2 before we hit 3?
Yeah, my overall thought was just like reading it, I was pretty surprised that this happens in issue 2.
Same here.
Based on what we read in the Robin series issue, I just assumed that this was the climax of the entire book. That everything would have built up to this confrontation with Two-Face, but it happens like pretty much right away right at the early midpoint in the overall arc of this book, and I was like, oh wow, where's it going to go from here? Because it's almost like there's got to be like more resolution, or like there's like going to be a rematch, like another. There's more to this story than just this, and that frankly got me even more excited because I was like, oh well, I've already read the other book, so I know how this turns out, but now what the hell happens after this?
Yeah. So let's just get into issue 3. So like I said, this came out in December of 2000, initially in the single issues, and then it was collected in 2001, like Terrence said, in the trade, full collected trade. Robin, Year 1, Book 3. Captain James Gordon interrogates Two-Face and learns that Robin might be dead. So Gordon tells his men to look at hospitals and search for a dead body. But Robin is not dead yet. After some first aid by Alfred, he is then brought to Dr. Tompkins, a free medical clinic who has the trust of Bruce Wayne. While Robin is being taken care of, Batman goes to talk to Gordon himself. He assures Captain Gordon that Robin is still alive, but will no longer act as Batman's partner, of course. Dick Grayson is less than enthusiastic as he learns of Bruce's decision to retire him. Over the following days, Dick works hard on the rehabilitation of his body. As Dr. Tompkins makes some final tests using equipment from the General Hospital, Mr. Freeze enters the building and raids the hospital's blood banks. Dick secretly follows him outside and picks up some clues which might lead him to Mr. Freeze's hideout. When Dick leaves a written message for Bruce, Mr. Freeze tries to blackmail the city because in winter the blood reserves tend to diminish quickly. Dick successfully finds Mr. Freeze and is able to defeat him right before Captain Gordon arrives. Dick confirms that his days as the vigilante are over, and he has left the mansion and indicates that he will never come back. In front of a TV store, Dick watches that Two-Face was able to escape the prison station. Suddenly, he is surrounded by some teenagers wearing black clothes. They attack him and Dick shows off his martial arts skills. A man who calls himself Shriek comes out of the shadows and invites Dick to become one of his pupils. This starts right off in the interrogation room, and this is something that I don't think we touched on it the last time Batman and Robin jumped off the roof at police headquarters. Gordon says basically if something happens to the kid, he's not going to be able to sanction what Batman's done. He's got the full weight of the law enforcement on it. So when Gordon's holding the bloodied bat in his hand, it's wrapped in the plastic bag or whatever, and Dent is just basically saying...
Oh, is that what that is? Because I wondered the whole time. It's like, what is this on the bat? It's like a weird... It's like, is this like a MMO aura? Or something is emanating something?
Yeah, it wasn't until...
Because it's evidence. I get it now.
Yeah, it's in the evidence bag. So it wasn't until Gordon runs out of the door and he says... But right now, I want to do nothing better than send him straight to the gas chamber. So when he's holding on to the bat right there, I'm like, oh, it looks kind of yellowish, so I believe that's probably in a bag. And so he's heading up to turn on the bat signal, waiting for Batman to arrive, which isn't going to come. So Leslie Tompkins in this, I think, is another good character exploration that Dixon is going into, and disdain's the wrong word. I can't think of the word. Her displeasure of okay, she obviously knows Batman and Robin, and she's got this kid, so everything's kind of converging on Bruce in a way that Alfred has been saying, is this right that we're doing by Master Grayson? Right. Gordon has pointed that out, and now here's Leslie pointing this out and saying, hey, I don't even have the tools available to do this. So what did you think of her interaction with Bruce and I guess essentially Dixon's writing of Leslie?
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, it just it highlights all those things you were saying, that, and is a good counterpoint to Alfred, because Alfred is like, well, I have to go along with this, and he's the one that sees it on a day-to-day basis. But Leslie is the one that really only sees things when there's bigger problems like this, and she's like, what the hell have you done to this child, And so Bruce has to dump him off on Leslie to fix him and leave, and she's just like, well, what are you doing, So yeah, I mean, it's kind of the thing where it's like, man, Batman, you better figure this out. Nothing better happened to this kid.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always one of those that when we're reading Dick Grayson's stories, they never really go into at the time Jason Todd was coming around, the worst thing I think that ever really happened to Dick was getting shot by the Joker in the arm, and at age 19, Batman saying, okay, you can't be Robin anymore. Right. So reading something like this, that something this horrific has happened to Dick Grayson early on, you would think it would start formulating that rift between Batman and Robin, but it's actually having the opposite effect, that Dick knows, yeah, something like this was probably going to happen, but you need me more now than ever. So when he gets sidelined, it's like the best thing for Dick would be to Bruce go, okay, you had a bad stumble and fall. We got to be more cautious when you go out. He sidelines him and actually pushes him into more danger because Dick feels like the purpose that he had, he doesn't have anymore, and winds up in his next scenario with Mr. Freeze, which ironically saying like, hey, we'll do this for a Christmas episode. I was pleasantly surprised to go, hey, we can kind of tie this in and say, well, it happens during Christmas. So what'd you think of how Dick's motivation has changed from one of being partnership to now one of being a lost soul?
It's one of those kindred spirits things, right? That's why Batman and Robin tend to work together, because they do have those common shared experiences. And this issue, I think, is a good exploration of that. We've saw a little bit of it in issue 1 with him just taking down the Mad Hatter by himself as Robin, but this one gets a little bit more into the idea of why Dick Grayson is doing this, not just to be, the happy-go-lucky foil to Batman. It forces him to be like, well, if I'm not going to be with Batman, or if I'm not going to be Robin with Batman, it's like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And he just has this compulsion to help people and do good with the skills that he has, and you definitely see that in full force. It's just a good character exploration of who Dick Grayson is and what drives him, and getting that right and seeing that in comics is, I don't think we see that as much as we could.
Yeah.
It's a hard. Dick Grayson's a tricky character because even it's hard to get him written right. Like especially when he's at times in modern comics where he's Batman, or when he's Nightwing, or when he's Rick Grayson or whatever the crap.
Right.
It's hard, and so seeing that explored in this period of Dick Grayson's tenure as Robin, you see even less. So that makes the novelty of it even that much better, and it just it's also really well written too. So it's a really good pause or story shift after something so heavy that happens in issue 2.
Yeah, and even the letter that Dick writes, this is, I guess it's time for me to move on. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do if I'm not allowed to help anymore. Alfred doesn't need to worry about entertaining me and take care of me. So you don't want a partner and you don't need a son, which is one of those, like, he's already kind of felt like he's lost twice. And, I'm sorry I failed you. I won't forget everything you've given me. So he's going to go out on his own, and who does he end up meeting up with the League of Assassins? I wasn't expecting to see that. So what did you think of that inclusion?
Yeah, that was probably the last thing that I expected to see in this book. Like the each issue, because at that point, like, each issue featuring kind of a major Batman villain was kind of my expectations. Like, oh, Mad Hatter, oh, Two-Face, oh, yeah, Mr. Freeze, and I was like, oh, wow, like, okay, like I wasn't expecting the issue 4 to kind of go into that. But it kind of reminded me a lot of the original Tim Drake Robin miniseries that Dixon did, where he has his training. It's kind of like that, where he's already been Robin, he's been with Batman, but now what does he do? And he's going rogue, he's doing his own thing, but he's still trying to do something with his life and stuff, but it gets in over his head, but he's going to make the best of it with his skills, and maybe he can make a difference. And what happens in this issue with him, like, I think we've even read other Tim Drake stories like this, where he's kind of infiltrated other groups or pretended to be like a ninja or somebody, like, he's got his Alvin Draper alias and stuff. Like, he's done that whole thing before, so it's cool to see that trope explored with the original Robin too, just to see, like, because you question as you read it, it's like, okay, is Dick, does he know what he's doing? Is he really going to the dark side, or is he just exploring this or seeing if he can, like, make a difference from the inside? And I think he doesn't even know in a lot of this, and so I think as the reader you're kind of going along that journey with him. So it wasn't what I was expecting to have a League of Assassins in here, but the way that everything comes together at the end was really satisfying, because at the start of issue 4 you're like, oh yeah, you had you've got to resolve the Two-Face stuff, you've got a League of Assassins, and then you start to have this callback to the character you saw at the very beginning of the story. You're like, oh yeah, they got to resolve that too. So how's all this stuff gonna converge? And it does. So
yeah. So January 2001, this issue 4, the finale of Robin Year 1, is released. The fourth and final book for Robin Year 1. Dick's new mentor turns out to be none other than Shriek, a member of the League of Assassins responsible for contracts in Gotham City. Under the name Freddie Lloyd, Dick continues to train alongside Shriek's other teenage mercenaries. Eventually, Shriek reveals that their genuine job will be the assassination of Two-Face. Shriek's people successfully find and invade Two-Face's latest hideout, but are stymied by Two-Face himself, who takes one of them hostage. Dick is once again dared to flip for an innocent life, but refuses. It causes Two-Face to fly into rage, allowing Dick to knock him off balance and steal his gun. Unable to stomach the cold-blooded murders, Dick spares Two-Face and flees, leaving his wounded victim vowing for revenge. Dick briefly returns to the Batcave and reports his findings in another letter, causing Batman, along with Two-Face, to scour the city for Shrike. Eventually all parties converge inside Shriek's hideout, sparking a three-way battle that kills Shriek and gravely injures Batman. Upon finding himself outnumbered, Two-Face flees while Batman reconciles with Dick. In the following days, Dick returns to Wayne Manor and is allowed to continue as Robin, on the condition that he is never again to question Batman's orders. Dick agrees, and shortly thereafter, the reinstatement of Robin finally brings Two-Face to justice. And like you said, Joseph Joe Minetti, which was a character going clear back to the very beginning that's in the cell, that's kind of pulling all of these threads of trying to take down Two-Face and hiring Shrike here to basically go out and contract for hire. Mm-hmm. And before we get to that, I was not expecting, and we had talked about it earlier, the little 2-page cameo with the Joker I thought was quite funny, that Batman just miraculously appears in the Joker's cell and he pulls the chair up. And I like as Batman is walking out of the cell, he's like, oh, hey, he's unbolted the chair. And the Joker's like, you don't want to know, hey, I had to eat those nuts and you don't want to know what I did with the bolts.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, the little sprinkle of the Joker in this story is just perfect. Like, he's not the focus, he's not the big thread, he's not the whatever, but it's one of those things where it's like, would the story feel complete without just a little hint of where the Joker is and what he's doing in this part of the story? Because clearly, if there's Robin already in past year 1, of course Batman's encountered the Joker, but it's led to believe that Dick Grayson and Batman hasn't really come up across the Joker together yet. Or maybe it was very brief, like there's not enough for him to kind of figure it out. But yeah, just to see get that little interaction was definitely a welcome treat.
Especially when he says, when you catch up with Two-Face, tell him I called dibs. Like, hearing that Two-Face got to take care of Robin first really kind of ticks off the Joker. So, and I'd be lying, like, when I got to this page, I was like, it's 2020, it's been a heavy Joker year with 3 Jokers and Joker War and everything. I was like, not that I think I've been oversaturated with Joker this year, as much as the things that I've liked or had issues with. I was like, oh, don't tie the Joker into the story and let him be pulling the thread. So I was glad it was just a little glimmer, like, show us where the Joker is and we're in and out. And it is a Two-Face story.
Yeah.
So by this point, if you haven't read it and the synopsis hasn't given it away, Dick is out on his own and hasn't returned back to the cave. Like, the holiday season, Christmas is come and gone. I'm assuming like New Year's they're also referring to, or into the new year. And there's been no sign of Dick Grayson, and Alfred has been reaching out to like Haley Circus, which I thought was a nice little callback. But I think the frustrating thing for Alfred is that Bruce is still on the case and is appearing that, not that he doesn't care, that Bruce is just so flippant of, he'll come back, Alfred. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And Alfred really kind of seems, if he wasn't broken before, after what happened to Dick, now that Dick is gone, I think Alfred is kind of at his wit's end, and this is what really started making me think. I don't know if we are told here by this point that the letter is that he's been writing all these issues is something personal that he's not going to give out. It's just a journal, a document of kind of his day-to-day working with Batman and Robin. But at this point, I was like, oh, is this a letter to like Children's Service or the courts or whatever? So what'd you think of Alfred during this point while Tim is doing his training with the League?
Yeah, when we talked about the Alfred stuff early on, I knew, like, okay, well, they're obviously setting something up. Dixon's such a accomplished writer. You don't, like, introduce a thing like this without letting it lead to its own little ending. So I was fully expecting it to come out to something, pretty cool and poignant by the end, and it did. I wasn't really expecting it to have, like, basically what happened was kind of what I expected. Like, I didn't think there would be some big, like, revelation of, oh, he's writing it to child services or he's doing this or whatever. Yeah. But the way they resolve it in the book I thought was really good.
When Dick is training with the group of kids and they're on their little mission to infiltrate into the museum and get into one of the vaults or whatever, really felt like a Batman kind of thing to do. But as much as Dick is trying to learn from a new master, he's still not wanting to kill and looking out for one another's as they're slamming guards around. And even when one of his other quote-unquote friends about knocks one of the vases off, he catches it. So some nice little moments for Dick Grayson.
Yeah. And that reminded me, too, of Tim Drake in terms of, like, when he's faking being somebody that's tough or macho or something, but later in the background he's like making sure people don't die or making sure he's cleaning up after everybody else's bumbling mistakes and stuff. That is totally I guess now we can call it a Robin trope.
Right. And I think I'm trying to remember what issue of Robin it was, like there was a vase that was going to fall. I think Tim swoops in and picks up the vase from crashing to the ground. I think it was Stephanie that knocked it over. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find that one or not, folks, but I'm pretty sure that something like that had happened. So, like we've been saying the whole time, like this is the issue where everything is wrapping up to the final end, where Two-Face is hiding out one of the most obvious places. Was it 220 like
Double Street Lane,
or whatever. Two-Face has no problem shooting dogs in this, like
Doubleday. Yeah, that's another one of those, like, geez, this Two-Face is just the worst.
Yeah, and he's more mad, like, well, I'm gonna have to get a couple extra dogs, and it's Dick that ends up using the dog whistle. And he's like, hey, I thought he was just gonna sedate him, and nah, he just shot his two dogs. Like, all right, we're throwing pretend babies off. We're beating a 12-year-old half to death. But this section where Dick gets a chance to come up against Two-Face, and it's always eerie and unsettling when Batman is holding a gun and he has that moment of like, oh, I can't be doing it. But for Dick to be holding the gun, I think is even more off-putting. Like, Dick had that opportunity, and I like the way that it was colored. And the pages aren't numbered here, I apologize. Where it's just a shot of Dick holding the gun, pointing at us, and the color palette is all red and muted red of the anger that he's feeling, and quickly drops it and then returns back to the cave. So that kind of really hit that this is the slippery slope that Alfred had been talking about, and being with the people that he's with, it would not have been, out of the ordinary for Dick to just pull the trigger, even though Shriek had said, we're not killing unless there's a purpose. So how did you feel about that scene with Dick?
Yeah, I mean, that's the emotional climax of the story, in my opinion, and the way the moment is constructed. Like I was saying, like, oh, I thought the earlier Two-Face stuff would have been a climax, but no, like the way this happens is really good, and it says a lot about who Dick Grayson is and where he's come, and like a warning of where he could go if he's not properly taken care of or takes care of himself. And the art and the coloring here is just so good. It's got minimal dialogue, and it's probably one of the best examples of the whole book. But the whole book has this a lot. Like, as stylized as things are, the facial expressions and the eyes of all these characters
are so well done that you really get, like, even when people are wearing masks, like, even with like, this is probably one of the best books I've seen with Batman and Robin like shapes and expressions.
Yes.
With the masks on, with just the whites of their eyes. Like, it's very, very, very effective the way that this works. And yeah, so like that was a really powerful moment in this book.
Even in the shadows where Dick had gone back to the cave, gets to meet up with Alfred and is writing the note, and ends up taking back off and gets captured by the League. When Batman enters after Dick has taken another beating, like seeing Dick get beaten around when he's asked like who he is, and ironically the name that he chooses, Freddie Lloyd, his father's middle name is Richard Fred Grace, which I thought was a nice call to his parents, which, you know, if you don't pay attention by the end of the book, on the nightstand for Dick, there's a picture of his parents' wedding. They're married in the big top, and it lists his middle name. But like you were talking about the whites of their eyes when they are fighting in the, which I'm assuming is a warehouse or wherever the League is operating out of, when Batman comes in and says his name is Robin, he's my partner. You don't see the whites of the eyes, but it's all the dark shadows that are still emotive and everything. And this section, I love seeing when an artist can draw in all darks and blacks and it works. It doesn't get lost or muddled at all. I think this section is really good with the fight that's going on between Batman, Robin, and the League and Two-Face. That Two-Face has figured out who has put the hit on him, and Batman obviously has figured out what's going on. So I think this is, and again, Two-Face, it's kind of funny with his counterpart basically telling him, hey, shoot in short little bursts like this. You know, he ends up shooting.
I was like, man, I know it's like, that's like a Tommy Lee Jones Two-Face moment. And he just like shoots him. I was like, I can see that Two-Face doing that.
Yeah, definitely.
Show me how to shoot a guy.
Point blank range, fire.
Fire in short bursts.
So, yeah, how this ends, I think, is very poetic. That it's after Shriek has basically impaled himself by getting shot, falling from the rafters, landing on his own scythe, and them capturing Two-Face. That Dick's first reaction is to go to Batman, say you're bleeding, says it looks worse than it feels. And Dick's like, really? Batman says no, alluding like, okay, yeah, but this kind of does hurt.
It hurts, yeah.
Yeah. And then re-emphasizing the oath that he took, and Bruce kind of laying down the law, like, you know, and I think it's also fitting. He says, I want you to be a good soldier, which...
I know. That moment got me. I'm like, ooh, man, they're like enhancing the Dark Knight Returns in this book too. Like, what the heck? And it makes sense and it works. Like, this is great.
Yeah.
I mean, unexpected, but like, what a great little end note for this that explains or adds extra context to the Batman Robin dynamic.
Yeah.
Ooh, dynamic.
Ooh, it's almost a duo there. But saying, like, you know, never again question my orders. And this is even if it means watching you die. Yes. So we know that Robin's will push the boundaries from time to time. But the little call outs and the little shout outs, like you said, having Barbara Gordon show up on the roof and seeing Batman and Robin there, and
or seeing just Robin for the first time. I thought that was great. And I forgot to mention too, there is like after Robin defeats Blockbuster earlier on, they have like a little call forward to foreshadowing for Bane. You know, Chuck Dixon couldn't not put a Bane reference in there, but having that in here, I was like, ooh, that's cool, you know.
Yeah. So you could tell, like, from 94 to 2000, this was something that I think Dixon was probably thinking of and taking little notes. And again, it would have been great to, like, Dixon, if you're listening, I just want to release a book of all of your ideas. Like, what?
Oh my gosh.
That would just be a treasure trove of endless possibilities. But I like that Robin, you know, Dick is looking at Barbara and Gordon's like, don't even think about it. You know, boy wonder. But who shows up? And I can't keep forgetting the other, is it Carl, I believe, not Carl, whoever Dick's friend was in the League shows up in front of Talia al Ghul. Like,
is that who that is? Yeah.
Yeah. So I was looking at DC Fandom here. So this,
I was wondering. I was like, do we see this character again? Like, is this important?
Talia al Ghul makes a cameo, bringing in one of the fallen members of Shrike's League of Assassins, because everybody else from this sect of a League of Assassins is gone. So we bring in Talia al Ghul into this.
Yeah.
And then, like it says, it ends with a newspaper clipping of Two-Face being apprehended by the mysterious duo, and I kind of like that Batman and Robin are both, still in that urban legend of Batman and Robin, and Alfred just hoping that Batman and Robin can get some sleep and get back to some type of normal days. So I thought this was, when you come across books like this that are this dense but good, I always end up kind of kicking myself and go, I've had this book literally for a year. I got it almost a year ago whenever this episode is released. I got it for Christmas from my wife, and it took a year to read this book, and I'm kind of kicking myself. So I have one half of this book to read, being the Batgirl book, so I'm not going to wait another year. So as we're opening gifts and taking those few little moments to sit around the tree and I want something to read, I think I'm going to read Batgirl Year One, because this team, I think, really knocked it out of the park with this. And like Terrence had said earlier, this is not, it's more of a lost gem, something that just kind of slipped through the cracks, and I don't think it's getting the attention that I think it probably needs. So what are your final thoughts of this book, and how does it, like, I know it's kind of hard to rank a book after reading it just once, but what do you think about it?
It is usually hard to rank books, and I usually don't like to rank a book or say where its place is or whatever after reading it for the first time, but for this one, I'm not afraid to do that, because reading it, I was exactly like you were saying. I was like, man, why haven't I read this? Is amazing. This is good, and I'm not afraid to say that after reading this book, this deluxe edition, that this is a stone cold classic. Like, this is a classic right off the bat. Like, the way it explores the relationship between the characters, the way that it feels timeless and does
that's a perfect word.
Yeah, the art, the tone, the character exploration, the dialogue, it's well written. Like, everything in this book is just really well done, and the fact that it's something that you could hand anybody that's at any level of Batman fandom would be able to read this and get something out of it, I think just makes this book kind of earn a spot on like any bat shelf in terms of something that's essential to read. Like, I don't say that lightly, and I don't get that feeling from many books after reading it for the first time, but this one is one of those. And yeah, so I could not recommend this book highly enough.
So, Terrence, what are your final thoughts for Robin Year One? And is this something that should wind up a little higher on the bat shelf as, I don't know, maybe required reading? Should this be looked at a little bit more fondly rather than a hidden gem?
Yeah, I feel like it should. I wondered, since this came out in 2001 and everybody knows what happened September 11th, 2001, I wondered if maybe it got a little lost in the shuffle.
Overlooked.
With all of that. I know that time period as well, comics were kind of, sales-wise and things were very flat and down, so maybe just a lot of people were not into comics at the time. It's definitely a great companion piece for Batman Year One. I think the art style and the theme and the feel of it and that world that they're in flows very nicely, especially with like the Dark Victory stuff and then the Year One. So yeah, I do feel like I don't feel like it's disrespected or underappreciated. I just feel like it's overlooked. Like, people don't even mention it, good or bad. Yeah. And part of that could be too is that Chuck Dixon wrote like thousands and thousands of stories, so it's hard to encompass all of them. And one thing I did really like about it too, and it might not we might not see a lot more of this, is that Robin in the pixie boots and the pixie costume and stuff. You know, a lot of the new year one Dick Grayson stuff that's come out in the last 10 years or so, he's basically wearing a modified Tim Drake costume. So it's kind of cool to see the classic, you know, original costume. And I don't know if we'll get that many more stories in that costume as well either. So yeah, overall it deserves a second look by fans.
Yeah.
So there you go.
And we've been saying it through this whole thing. I think even in the first few pages of reading the book, I was already thinking like, this is something special. And I don't normally swear on the show, but I'm like, damn it, I should have read this back in 2000 when it was coming out. I remember seeing it on the shelf, and I don't know whatever it was. I mean, it had Dixon's name on it. I was buying a lot of Dixon stuff during this time period. So for me to get it in a trade through those first couple pages, I was just like, this feels like it's something special. Like, I don't want to go to like something modern, like, you know, Three Jokers, how people thought about it. Like, I think people wanted to say like, oh, this is going to be a tops on the bookshelf for the year. I was thinking this by page 2 early on. Like, I didn't know how I was going to feel by the end of it, but just in the presentation and the writing, and I think just the way the book looks. And you said it earlier, it was this timeless feel. It made me harken back to Batman the Animated Series. It's of a time, and it kind of fits in that. This is a great evergreen book that you could pick up off the shelf.
Absolutely.
And just read at any given point, and it's going to be new and it's fresh. And we've only pulled out a few little references that are in here, and there's a few more. When you mentioned the thing about Bane, I totally didn't even see that when I was going through it the first time. So if Ryan Lauer isn't listening to this show,
I know,
and if Ryan and I don't try and be the first to get to the Batman book club, like I got a book. So yeah. I hope somebody out there says, you know, Lauer, you ought to read this book, and I hope one of his guests picks it up, because this, even though
it's not Batman year one, but man, like this book deserves the attention.
Yeah, especially when you have Batman year 1, and you have Batman year 2. That's where it starts dividing, going, it doesn't really kind of feel like a successor to Batman year 2. And as much as we love Batman year 3, it's kind of by name alone. If this was titled Batman year 3, or year 2, and even though it is a year 3 story, I would go, yes, thematically, it fits right in with year 1 in its presentation. You don't have the timestamp going on, but you do have the constant narration through the whole story from Alfred. So I think it really kind of ties that in. So I think this is like high praise from both of us. This is definitely a Christmas present if you haven't gotten one for yourself this year. Check this book out. Buy it in the deluxe edition. Is there anything in the deluxe edition, like a little extras or anything like that, or is it just...
So you don't have the deluxe edition yet?
No, I just have the trade of Batgirl and Robin year 1.
Okay, after reading this, do you think you'll get the deluxe edition?
I think I probably will.
It's gorgeous. Yeah, there's not a lot of extra stuff, but the back does have a sketchbook section, and it's gorgeous. Like, you see all these really nice sketches, and you get to see like what other characters would have looked like that aren't in the book. Like, you see some Catwoman. You see,
really?
Yeah, there's like a little bitty, like you see like a Man Who Laughs, an inspired looking Joker. There's some cover sketches and stuff. There's even like a little hint of like Deadman, and I don't know if that was like
really.
It was like, oh, I wonder if like he was ever considered to be in the book or planned to be in the book at some point, which would have been maybe a little interesting, but.
Yeah,
but yeah, like it's not a lot, but it's cool just to see the sketches. They're all in, the blue line sketch stuff. A lot of head sketches and stuff, just all like scattered together. It's really cool stuff for sure.
A little shout out to a listener of the show, BJ Shea, had tagged us, the Batman Book Club, J. Oz, and Holy Batcast, that he bought this just a few days ago, and he got it half off. I'm wondering where he got it from, but it looks like it's a red trade dress with Robin with his cape.
Yeah,
building
it's the
up,
deluxe.
so.
It's really nice. It's really good.
Yeah, so very cool,
and it fits right on the shelf, along with the other Year 1 and Year 2 deluxe edition.
Man.
Like it's cool for sure, and it's the first time it's been in hardcover, which is probably another reason why the book doesn't have this perceived prestige that we thought. Like, it's easy to overlook because it's not been like in a nice hardcover at all. Like,
yeah,
it's been collected, I think, and yeah, like you've got the trade that's got both Robin and Batgirl Year 1 in it together. I think that is also a relatively recent book.
Yeah, I'm trying to flip through to see the publication on this, and it looks like it's a 2013 is when this trade was put together. So this is 13 years after the single issues came out. I mean, if you go back to when issue 1 came out, so it's been recently collected, and then to get a hardcover, some odd years later, is really kind of interesting. So that will officially end our 80th anniversary episode and the 80th anniversary for a year. So big thank you to everybody that has participated this year and helped us move the show along. Next year, in 2021, we're looking for a better year than 2020 was. But as things have kind of come and gone this year, things we can and can't do, there have been a lot of bright spots throughout the year, and just in things that we've read and different ways that we've done the year. So hopefully this puts a nice capper on the year for you. Thank you for listening to the show, and we'll be going full steam back into Batman Legacy and wrapping that story up and seeing where Tim Drake's journey will take us. Any final thoughts for the end of this year and maybe what your holiday season is going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any more positive things I could say about this book. I mean, it's really good. Get it. I think this year's been just a big dumpster fire, but it's been
right.
it's in more ways than one. My 2019 also sucked. So hopefully 2021 will be better for a lot of people. But the good thing is that doing things like this show has been a really nice thing to be able to do, to kind of like tune out the rest of the world and read read some Batman comics. That's been fun. So yeah, like Christmas should be pretty chill this year, but I've got the Batman tree. I've actually had my Batman tree up since March. When all this nuttiness happened, I was like, ooh, I'm going to make myself feel better, and I put up the Batman tree, and I'll take it down when this is over, but it's not over, so the Batman tree's still up. So I was slightly prepared for the holiday season already. So but yeah, so I can't wait to get into the new year and keep going with what we're doing and jump back into Legacy, because that's been fun too.
Yeah. So have a happy holiday season, however you celebrate it, and thanks for helping with the distraction of 2020. Thanks for listening to the show, and we will see you guys next year. On the behalf of Terrence, this is Ryan and Rob saying happy holidays and Merry Christmas. We'll see you guys in 2021. Take care. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake podcast. This has been brought to you by the BatmanUniverse.net. Tim Drake, Robin, and all Batman-related characters are under copyright of DC Comics. This podcast is solely for entertainment purposes, so no infringement is intended by this show. This show is not a good revenue stream. Actually, there's not a stream at all. All music and sound clips are under copyright by their respected copyright holders. So there should be no need to send the Penguins lawyers after us for ill-gotten gains, because there are none. You can get a hold of the show a few different ways. We are on Twitter at ELTD Podcast. You can also email in at robineltdpodcast@yahoo.com. Our Facebook page can be found at www.facebook.com/everyonelovesthedrake. And as always, you can message directly over at the BatmanUniverse.net. So email, tweet, or message us. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll read your comments or responses on the show. The show you're listening to can be found a few different ways through iTunes and Windows Media, also over at our host, TBU. Leave us a review on iTunes if you listen there. It'll help spread the word of the show. Make sure you head over to the BatmanUniverse.net, your home for all things Batman and Robin. Thanks for listening to the show and hearing why everyone loves the Drake. We'll see you in a few weeks. Take care.